Hello, my name is Shavana. Welcome to the Earth Sign Publications podcast. On this platform, I share my astrology insights through the perspective of me being an Earth sign and more specifically a Taurus stellium. Today, we're actually going to talk about Taurus. There's a stereotype that I want to debunk, so let's get into it. This podcast was sparked by a post that I saw, and I'll put it on the screen. It was a carousel post that I saw on Instagram during the FIFA World Cup season, which just ended a few months ago. And the post made me feel a little salty, not gonna lie, but it also made me want to address a rhetoric that Tauruses get in pop astrology a lot. So if you look at this post, you'll see that the creator separated all the signs, or majority of the signs, I should say, into a position on the soccer field. Obviously, this is a post to just kind of be in theme with what was happening in the world, which was World Cup season. So that makes sense. And keep in mind, there can only be 11 players on the field at once per team, but there are 12 zodiac signs. So my first thought was perhaps the creator who made the post just had to put, if there's 12 zodiac signs and only 11 can be on the field, so they have to like pick 11 zodiac signs who would be on the field and then one player or one sign that would be left out. And so funny enough, the sign that they chose to leave out was Taurus. And what I mean by leave out is that if you see on the screen, they described Taurus as the bench warmer, which obviously is not a position on the field. And so I will say that at first, when I looked at the post and I saw that Taurus was the bench warmer, I'm thinking that they only did this to the Taurus zodiac sign, like they only put Taurus as a bench warmer. But actually, if you really read closely to some of the other slides, you'll see that they didn't actually give every single sign a specific position. For example, if you look at Leo, you don't see a specific position that they would place for them, like midfielder, it's something like that. You don't see a position, you see like what type of player they would be. So if the creator didn't give them a specific position, they at the very least described what type of player they would be. So like for example with Leo, they didn't give them a position, but they said, oh, okay, Leo is going to be the dramatic diva. And they also did the same thing with Scorpio. If you look at the Scorpio post more closely, you'll see that they didn't give Scorpio a specific soccer field position, but they did give them a type of like role and type of player they would be, which would be the silent assassin, as you can see. So every other zodiac sign either got a specific position on the field, or at the very least they were described as what the type of player they would be if they were on the field. But then there's Taurus, who's just the bench warmer. Now granted, they didn't necessarily say anything negative about a Taurus. They did speak positively, I guess, in a way. They said Tauruses are just vibing, front row seats, free travel, catered meals, World Cup paycheck. If the coach calls their name in the 89th minute, they're like, wait, me? Perfectly content collecting the medal either way. See, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that. And also, by the way, I am not making this post to, say anything bad about the astrology or the astrologer or anything like that. So please don't go under their post spreading like mean comments or anything. That's not what this post is. Again, I'm here to just debunk an overarching rhetoric that I see given towards Taurus a lot, and I'm just using this post because like I said, it kind of sparked it in me. And so yeah, now I just want to talk about it. So let's just get into what a few things that I have to say about the post, and then the overarching like what this means and what I've been seeing that Tauruses get described. For starters, bench warmer obviously isn't a soccer position. The original point of the post was to assign every zodiac sign a soccer position, as I said. And Taurus being assigned bench warmer doesn't actually answer the question, which is what position would a Taurus best play, and or what type of player would a Taurus make. So obviously being a bench warmer doesn't answer neither one of those questions. So that was one of the reasons why it kind of was like a little annoying to see, because I'm like, okay, but what is the position like on the field, or what type of player? Obviously being a bench warmer, that means you're on the team and everything like that, but it's not a position, and it's not something that I don't think any player would be like perfectly fine with being, which is the bench warmer. But also, even if a Taurus were to be a bench warmer, that just means that they are a substitute player and they would come in for the players who are starting. But even a substitute player or aka a bench warmer has a position. So even then that still doesn't really answer the original question or the original premise of giving each player a position, because even if a Taurus were to be a substitute player, that means they're a substitute player for a specific position. So what position would that be? Someone coming off the bench might be a midfielder, defender, forward, goalkeeper, etc. So where would you place Taurus in that sense? Like what position? Or at the very least, how would you describe what a Taurus soccer player would be like? Nobody overall, I don't think anybody, especially with something as big as FIFA World Cup, I don't think any player is selected for a team because their actual position is a bench warmer. Like, I don't think the coaches who hire these players are like, oh yeah, you'd make a great bench warmer. Everyone who's on the team is supposed to contribute to the team. Obviously there's the starters, and the starters are likely going to get a lot of the minutes, but the people who don't get the starting position and who sit on the bench, they're not just there for fun. They're there as backup. They're there if the starters get hurt or if the starters need a breather, whatever the case may be, but they're still expected to come on the field and contribute however way that may look for them if their name is called. And so I feel like if a coach genuinely believed that a Taurus player, and I'm just speaking it broadly, like just any Taurus player contributed nothing useful on the field, if a Taurus player didn't contribute anything useful on the field, then I don't think a Taurus would make the roster at all. So that's just the first thing that I wanted to address, that the overall post, and not even necessarily the post, but just specifically how Taurus was described, doesn't actually make sense if you like actually read into it. It doesn't really make sense because one, a bench warmer is not a position. There's a position that bench warmers play. And then even then, I don't think a coach is going to hire someone on a FIFA World Cup team with the intentions of like, oh yeah, you'd make a great bench warmer. Like, no, I think every player who gets hired is significant. They're just not first string. Overall, even if Taurus wasn't one of the starting 11, you'd still have to answer what position does Taurus play when they're substituted into the game. And then the next point that I wanted to make about the post was that and I've already been saying this so far, but I keep emphasizing that this is a FIFA World Cup team, which is one of the most elite teams that you could ever play on, especially in the sport of soccer. So we're not just talking about a random Taurus person who doesn't care about soccer. We're talking about a hypothetical Taurus who has made it all the way to the World Cup, a hypothetical Taurus soccer player who has made it all the way to the World Cup. Think about what is required to reach that level of making a World Cup team. That's years of training, conditioning, competition, practice, the physical discomfort on your body, strict schedules. You got to deal with losses. You got to deal with injuries sometimes. You also have to make the team, so you literally have to go through tryouts, and then you just have to continuously improve. You essentially have to be good enough. So if a tourist genuinely just wanted to relax and didn't want to participate and just wanted to ride the bench, why would they pursue a professional career such as soccer to the point where they are now trying out and competing for a World Cup FIFA team? That's the question that I would ask. Like, sometimes I think when people, and this goes to my point of like how Taurus is described, which I know I haven't gotten to that point yet of the overarching thing, but I'm still just kind of looking at this post and kind of analyzing it, because it lets me know what people truly think about Taurus. And again, as I said, the post wasn't negative. Like, I recognize that it was meant to be positive. It was meant to be like, oh, Tauruses, y'all just like to sit and look pretty. I see that all the time. People never give Tauruses credit for like hard work. I mean, some people do. I have seen some astrologers who can acknowledge the hard work that Tauruses put in, but everyone else just kind of either describes Tauruses as lazy, or they try to like paint it through rose-colored glasses by saying, no, you're not lazy, you just like to sit pretty, which is just a, positive way, or I guess a nice way of saying lazy. And when it comes to something such as this post, I feel like that rhetoric doesn't really make sense, because it's the FIFA World Cup team. In order to even make the team, you quite literally cannot be lazy. I mean, I guess some players can be lazy, but there's still work that you have to put in, and you still have to be good. You still have to be skilled, and that requires the coaches and the coaching staff recognizing the talent in you, which unless you are just born with some God-given talent that is just unmistakable out of this world, you're likely training and have put in so much repetition and time to perfect your craft. In this case, that craft is playing soccer, playing professional soccer at that. So I feel like a Taurus's presence on a World Cup roster already establishes that soccer is something they consider worth their time and energy, which, again, if you know anything correct about a Taurus, you know that when a Taurus has a goal, no pun intended, when a Taurus has a goal or when a Taurus has something that they really believe in or really want to pursue, they will give all of their time and energy into it. So for some Tauruses, it's whatever sport they may play if they're an athlete. For other Tauruses, it could be something related to school or some other profession, or maybe it may not be a profession at all. The point is whatever that a Taurus has their like mind set towards, they put in a lot of time and energy and end up being able to fully excel to the like sometimes to the top, to the best limits, because this is the only thing that they care about. Taurus is one of those signs that can be one track minded in the sense that like they have one goal, one target, and they put all of their eggs in one basket and focus on that one target until they become so good and so skilled at it. So I briefly already described this, but getting into the overarching ways that Tauruses can sometimes be described, I already said it's either on one end being lazy or the positive version of that, or a way that people try to make it lighthearted, which is just saying like, oh, you just like to sit pretty. To that I will say that there's a difference between like having no energy, which is essentially kind of what lazy is, or even like being lethargic is, versus conserving energy. And I think that is what Taurus is doing. I mean, I know that's what Taurus is doing because I'm a Taurus. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some Tauruses are lazy, and there are some other Tauruses who do like to sit pretty. I wouldn't doubt that. But I also wouldn't doubt that there are other signs who are lazy and other signs who just kind of want to sit pretty and just exist and just kind of have everything fall out of the sky in their lap without having to lift a finger, which, to be fair, I have seen some astrologers tell Tauruses like, oh, you don't have to lift a finger, like you're a Taurus, you're ruled by Venus, you don't have to do anything, you can just exist. And I do have something to say to that as well, but I will address that on a later date. Right now I just want to specifically keep talking about this post. But going back to what I was saying, there's a difference between conserving energy and having no energy. I think an uninspired Taurus, a Taurus who doesn't know their purpose yet, will appear as if they have no energy, but everyone else is more than likely conserving their energy. I feel like Tauruses don't necessarily want to expend energy unnecessarily, and I think that's different from being incapable of working hard. The important question with Taurus is often, is this worth my energy? Like that is a question that a Taurus is likely asking all the time internally with almost anything in life, whether it be a job, a person, whatever the case may be. The $1 million question is this worth my energy? And once a Taurus decides something is worth their energy, that fixed nature or that lethargic, lazy nature, whatever you want to call it, can become persistent and hardworking and working harder than anybody else in the room. However, a Taurus who doesn't care about whatever thing that they have going on, and specifically soccer, since that's what I'm talking about, probably wouldn't dedicate themselves to it. But at that point, if a Taurus isn't dedicating themselves to it, then again, as I said, they most likely wouldn't make the World Cup roster in the first place. So I feel like a Taurus who has made the World Cup clearly does care. Like soccer is something that is important to them. And the motivational question has already been answered by the scenario itself. So the question of, is this worth my energy? You can see what Taurus's answer to that question is by simply them being on the roster themselves. And so this kind of leads me to another stereotype which falls in line, I think, with this same post, and that is the accusations of Tauruses being stubborn. And I call them accusations because I genuinely think that's what they are. And I'll again discuss that on a later date. But I think people sometimes forget that Taurus is fixed earth. And that fixed earth, the modality of being fixed, I think is what people forget when they call Tauruses stubborn. Sometimes you're not running into a stubborn Taurus, you're just running into a Taurus who's acting in their nature, which is fixed, just like how there are other fixed signs such as Aquarius, Leo, and Scorpio. So people forget. I am convinced that people forget that Tauruses aren't stubborn every single time. You're just looking at what it means to be fixed. If you're not a fixed sign and you're either mutable or cardinal, then you're probably not going to be able to understand fixed energy, just like how a fixed sign probably doesn't understand mutable energy or doesn't understand cardinal energy. When it comes to stubbornness, I feel like stubbornness is an extreme expression of something more neutral, and that more neutral aspect, steadfastness, persistence, or consistency, commitment, endurance, and staying power. However you want to describe it, stubbornness is like one end of the expression, typically a negative extreme expression, but people forget that on the other end, that same energy that can make a Taurus stubborn is also energy that can make Taurus very consistent and very committed and enduring, which are typically more positive words. It's describing the same function as what could be described as stubborn. It just depends on the context that you're using it. But personally, I feel like if Tauruses can stubbornly refuse to move away from something, then Tauruses can also stubbornly refuse to give up on something. And in that sense, we would call that positive. Like if a Taurus has a goal and they never give up, depending on what the goal is and, time, place, who, what, when, or why, how, we would look at that as positive of never giving up on yourself or never giving up on your goals. And just going back to the post and, the creator saying Tauruses are the benchwarmers, the question that I also have for that is, why are we assuming that Taurus isn't a starter? The post, I feel like, assumes that Taurus is coming off the bench in the first place, but why is that? What inherently makes Taurus incapable of being one of the best players on the team? How do we know that Taurus isn't good enough to be a starter, or better yet, the best player on the team? I feel like if someone has invested years of effort into developing a skill, why would we automatically assume they're not good enough to start, let alone be the best player on the team? Again, if there's going to be any sign that can be the best of something, it can be there are some people who are just naturally good at things, but then there's also people who are good at things because they put in so much unwavering talent, and people seem to understand that when it comes to Taurus. But in the same breath, also, again, look at them as like bench warmers, and sometimes those two things don't really go together. A sign that is putting in a lot of work. Now, granted, again, only 11 players can be on the field at the same time. So obviously, if there's limited spots on the field, everyone can't be on the field. But again, why would we assume that a Taurus is probably going to be one of the ones not on the field? And then another part of the post that I wanted to talk about is just some of the descriptors that they gave, that Tauruses are just going to be vibing, sitting in the front row seat, getting free travel, catered meals, etc. And again, that doesn't address the soccer position. What does liking, free food and front row seats have to do with a soccer position? Yes, Tauruses like comfort, relaxation, food, luxury, beautiful surroundings, etc. But what does that tell us about what position Taurus should play? It doesn't tell us anything. Those are just interests and preferences. I feel like soccer positions should theoretically be assigned according to traits relevant to soccer, such as like having the traits of physical endurance, strategy, reaction time, patience, communication, consistency, aggression, adaptability, physicality, leadership, decision making. They did it with some of the other signs. If you look at the post again, they described some of the other signs with traits of theirs that would be relevant to soccer. But then again, with Tauruses, they just got bench warmer. I feel like if Taurus is supposed to receive a soccer position, then the Taurus traits relevant to athletic performance should be considered. And I've already talked about some of the things that would be relevant to athletic performance, such as endurance and just repetition with craft. Oftentimes, Tauruses can be strong, also very punctual, and also usually pretty confident too, especially if a Taurus knows that they put in work for something. The more work a Taurus puts in with something, the more confident they're going to be with said thing because they know they put in the work. And aside from the lazy stereotypes you see in pop astrology, as well as the stubborn stereotypes Tauruses get in pop astrology, I also feel like pop astrology confuses Taurus's interest with Taurus's capabilities. I feel like you see this happening constantly where you'll see a post always limiting Tauruses to Tauruses liking food, Tauruses liking sleep, Tauruses liking luxury, Tauruses liking comfort. But those statements tell you what Tauruses supposedly like. They don't necessarily tell you what Taurus is capable of doing. Meanwhile, I feel like the other signs oftentimes are frequently described through functional characteristics. For example, like Aries gets described as competitive or assertive. Geminis get described as communicative or adaptable. Leos get described as confident, commanding. Capricorns, disciplined, ambition. Then Tauruses get likes food, likes sleeping. And I feel like that's not an equal comparison. I feel like some functional Taurus qualities could include persistent, enduring, really good at resource management. But overall, that's all I really had to say about the post. Like I said, I just wanted to just address why is Taurus so often interpreted according to what we supposedly enjoy instead of what we're actually capable of. Again, I do see it sometimes with some astrologers. And again, the World Cup post, the one that I'm talking about, is just one example of a pattern that I've seen in pop astrology. So I don't have any ill will towards this particular post, nor the astrologer who made the post. I just saw it and I was like, you know what, this just kind of made me want to address something. But if you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe to the Earth Sign podcast, subscribe to the channel. You want to hear more astrology insights from me, especially if you're a Taurus or have Taurus placements. I'll be making a lot of posts for Tauruses. Definitely subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.